to be unkind to our fellow brothers, whoever they may be, brothers in Islam and brothers in humanity, because they make mistakes with us. Because perhaps they misspoke, because they forgot something, because they didn't do something properly. It is important to have strength. It is also important, as much as possible, not to use it except in the fashion allowed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A man is not strong if he beats his wife and terrifies his children. A man is strong if he protects his wife and is kind to his children. There's a vast difference between the two. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam risked his life countless times in wars, and he never lifted his hand to his wives, no matter what they said or did to him. To the point that even their brothers and relatives were shocked. There's a famous story, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where one of his wives, astaghfirullah, I forget the exact one, I believe it was Aisha, may Allah forgive me if I'm wrong. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was talking to a group of people, and Aisha, I believe, was impatient. And so impatient that in fact that she spilled water on the ground in front of him. The exact details, astaghfirullah, I don't remember the exact details, so I don't want to misquote them. But Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reported to have said, when all the other companions were shocked, first she thundered and then it rained, and dismissed the matter, because it was not worthy of him creating some kind of physical confrontation. Although at the time, in the culture of the Arab man at the time, that would have provoked a kind of physical reaction that you wouldn't even see in a horror film. But he said no. He said it thundered and she rained. And that's it. He forgot about it. Because he had mercy. He had nothing to prove in terms of his strength, in terms of his courage. He fought the people. He risked his life. He was physically strong. And that's where he demonstrated his strength. When it was time to protect the weak, when it was time to protect the ummah, when it was time to protect his brothers, that's where he demonstrated his strength. He did not demonstrate his strength on somebody weaker than he was, be it a woman, a child, a slave, anybody else. So strength is an essential quality, but strength is meaningless without mercy. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is stronger than all of us put together times a billion. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful to us. And rarely do we see His strength unless we transgress all bounds over and over and over and over again. And even then, it is mainly to remind us. It's an aspect of His mercy. So strength and mercy are important characteristics. One of my favorite hadith in the Quran, favorite sayings in the Quran, favorite hadith in the Quran, astaghfirullah. One of my favorite ayahs in the Quran, which is also reflected in the hadith, Allah forgive me, it's been a long day, is enter houses through the front door. And this refers to a central trait of Islam and Muslim men in a world that is completely lacking in it. And that's honesty, directness. Many times in this society, we live now in cities. At the time when Islam was revealed, many people lived in farms and on mountains as shepherds, this kind of thing. On a farm and in agricultural life, people spoke less to each other. They were more isolated. So words were used for survival. Don't send your sheep to that cliff. Water is over here, not there. This kind of thing. So when people had to use words less, they were generally rougher and more honest. But then people got to be living in cities. There were some ancient cities in the olden times, but now most people live in cities. In cities, people are close to each other all the time, and so words are used to get things, as opposed to for survival. It's no longer about keeping your sheep from a cliff, or figuring out if the crops have rain or not. It's often about getting ahead in a world where we are far removed from farms. And so words become tools for people to manipulate each other. Sometimes words are used properly. We call this manners. If you notice something negative about someone, you don't necessarily say it. But other times we have things like flattery, where you praise somebody excessively because you want them not to notice something else you're doing. Or backbiting, or cheating, or all these other different reasons why people lie. We see, they say, at least 3,500 commercial messages a day. All of them are lies in many cases in various forms, trying to get us to buy something we don't need, or do something we probably shouldn't, or spend money that we probably should use for ourselves. So words have shifted from tools of survival and tools of mutual protection to tools of deceit. But the Muslim man enters a house by the front door. It means if he has a situation, he confronts it with honesty. With manners, yes. With courage, yes. With modesty, yes. But he confronts the issue. He does not lie. Honesty is one of the reasons why entire groups of people came to Islam. Honesty in business is so rare that entire groups of people, entire cultures, have converted to Islam because they met Muslim business people who were honest. And this was so shocking that if you did trade with proper Muslim people, that everything they said was going to happen and the trade happened on time. That if they said this was the amount of the weight of something, whether it's gold or cloth, that that's the amount of gold or cloth you got. That you didn't need to send 17 people to weigh it to see if they cut things out of the corner or maybe saved a stitch here or there. Honesty is one of the characteristics that we can use to make great Muslim men. Honesty is what separates us from those who believe that this life is all that there is. Because it is, if we are honest with ourselves, fairly easy to deceive people. But it is impossible to deceive God. And if we act as though God is watching everything that we do, and yes, we are compassionate, and yes, we are strong, and yes, we are merciful, but at all times we are honest, we separate ourselves. We separate ourselves from the mass of people who believe that the next 5 seconds is more important than the next 5,000 years. There is something in each of us that we believe lives forever, and that is our soul. Long after our bodies are old, long after our hair is gone, long after our teeth are replaced, there is one part of us that exists for all time. And that's what's inside us, what makes us human, what defines us, what takes the mere prose of the actions of our lives and turns it into the poetry of what is possible. Long after Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's body is gone and not in front of us, his soul lives in every masjid. His good deeds live in every masjid. His words and actions live in every masjid. This is 1400 years ago. But the man has traveled through time and space, and he lives among us. His soul does, because of the good that he did. If we act as though eternity is in front of us, and eternity is always watching us, and eternity in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge us, it puts a whole different complexion on whether we need to get 5 or 6 cents more out of the dollar that somebody gave us. So honesty is an important separating value and characteristic of Muslim men. Go on in the next series of khutbahs to talk about Muslim men and what has defined them and what has separated them and what has made them different from other men, because these are things that are within our control and our power to do. And you will find that a Muslim man, when properly created through submission to the will of Allah, he cannot live as an island. He's like an ant in an ant colony that must find another ant to bump heads with. Because when he looks around and he sees problems, he looks for solutions to those problems. There, now. And when he finds other Muslim men looking for solutions to these problems, he has, without knowing it, a virtual ummah. A group of people who are fumbling towards God, looking forward to the day when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes to them through the angel of death. And just as Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam was confronted by the angel of death, and he said he knew it was his time, Ibrahim alayhi salam believed that he was and was the friend of God. So he says, what friend would take another friend's life? And the angel of death said, what friend doesn't want to see his own friend? And Ibrahim alayhi salam said, subhanallah, now is my time. Let us be the kind of man that Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam was, so that when our time comes, and when the end of our physical tour on this little planet is over, that we are rushing towards God, excited by the possibility that we would see our best friend, inshallah. The making of men is something you can do all day, every day. You can do it in your office, you can do it with your sons and your families, you can do it in a grocery store. It's the one act that is available to us, that's available all the time. How you speak to people, how you see them, how you value them, how you treat them, how you develop yourself in your own spare time, physically, mentally, emotionally, intellectually, how you manage the resources and gifts God has given you. These are all aspects of the making of Muslim men. You can make yourself better, stronger, wiser. You can do the same thing for the people around you, not by physical force, not by intimidating them or ordering them, but by appealing to their heart and soul to understand that there is another way to live. For the animal way to live is filled, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised, with fear, with grief, and with doubt. And so if we reduce men to animals, what we do is we take away that part of them that is most beautiful. Because if they're always afraid, and they're always in fear, and they're always in doubt, they lack the time to reflect and to appreciate what God has given them. They lack the time to use their minds because they're always using their impulse. And so it is that they move around in some kind of schizophrenic, animalistic existence in which everyone grabs from everyone else and nothing great is ever done. All of the things that we like most about life last a long, long time. Whether it's great buildings, whether it's gigantic trees, whether it's the forest or the ocean, all of these things have a permanence that doesn't end in the 5 seconds that we see them. And yet we spend a lot of our time ignoring what is permanent, what is beautiful, what is evidence of the hand of God, and instead we devote them to things which we know will last for seconds. Perhaps it's money, perhaps it's fame, perhaps it's the impression of other people. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with an alternative path. And that path is to suggest to the world that there is something entirely different. A higher plane of life while we are alive, and a higher plane of life even when we are dead. And that is the plane of life that we call Islam. And that is the plane of life that we call being Muslim. And that is the plane of life that allows us to be entirely different from other people, not because of how we were born, or how much money we have, or what looks or other characteristics there are there, but because of choices that we made, choices that other people could make. And that is the beauty of God, that He would give us all the opportunity to make choices which would draw us closer to Him. He would not condemn us to a life where, as in the caste system, one group of people is always going to be poor, one group of people will always be business people, one will always be priests. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rejects this and says that His is a heart that is open to all who come to Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, he who takes 1 step towards me, I will take 10 steps towards him. And forgave Adam in spite of his rejection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance in the first place, and promised him a life of permanent absence of fear, absence of grief, and absence of doubt. We are not in the business of making televisions, or making guns, or making car bombs, or making any physical object first. We are in the business of making men. Muslim men, the proudest, finest, strongest people on earth. The people who are the envy of those who wish to be like them, and who strike fear in the hearts of those who wish to steal, those who wish to lie, those who wish to deny someone his basic humanity. Let us live for the day when anyone doing evil anywhere in the world does so very, very with huge fear. You know why? Because someone is whispering, if you find out about this, the Muslims will come. If anybody wishes to deny someone an education, say, don't do that. The Muslims will come. If anyone wishes to deny man his liberty, you say, no, don't do that. The Muslims will come. If anyone puts a man in prison against his will, say, no, you can't keep him locked up for long. The Muslims will come. There was a time and a place in human history where that was true, where a pirate might grab an old lady outside the coast of India, and the Muslims did come. Where a man would kidnap a Christian princess in Spain and was punished for it. Why? Because the Muslims came. Our greatest failure as a society is not to live up to the promise that God made us, that gave us. And that is the greatest promise of all, which is the promise of everlasting light in His eyes. All we have to do is follow the rule book that we are given. All we have to do is follow the example that we are given. We already know how the story turned out. There's no finer human story than the life of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. There are no finer people than the companions of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The people who liked them and the people who hated them all admired them for who they were, how they lived, and the gift that they brought. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us.